All right, welcome. Drink with James, episode 185. The Negronis are back in the Fohr office. My good friend is a talented bartender, comes in and does a bunch of little growler bottles of Negronis and growler bottles of Manhattans. And so, anytime you want, well, not anytime you want. We don't drink at like 3 p.m. I don't want you guys thinking we're total alcoholics here at Fohr. But it is nice to always have pre-made Manhattans and Negronis sitting up in the office. But we had run out recently. He came back, refilled us. But he just moved down to Florida. And now we do not have a bartender in New York to come refill our Negronis and Manhattans. So if you know a talented bartender, if you are a talented bartender, and you want to side hustle, making some money, doing about 300 cocktails a month for our team to have, drop me a line. We are looking for a replacement. I just got back from a trip with my family, which was fantastic. We were skiing up in Lake Placid, beautiful little town that nobody really goes to, but if you're in New York City, you absolutely should. They have a hotel up there called the Lake Placid Lodge that is exquisite. And they certainly charge you for it, but it is fantastic and such a Northeast gem that people don't know about and don't talk about. But what's interesting is, I was up there and it's beautiful, snow globe up there, and I shot 5 rolls of film in the Leica. I brought many cameras, and I find it very difficult to share it sometimes, I feel like for me, and I'm interested, how you guys deal with this, that I get busy and, my days are full, I get in at, try and get in at like 9:30. I'm in the office till 7:38. And then, at events or dinners or something, I usually get home around 10. So I'm out of my apartment from, 9 to 10 most days. And, during the day, I don't really have time to sit and write a caption. And I find it very difficult to just bring myself to publish. And so I now have all these photos. I think it's partially shooting the film as well, is that I get the photos back a week after the stuff has already happened. And so I'm not kind of publishing about it in real time. But I have a real hard time hitting publish nowadays. And I think for those of you who it's your job, it's kind of easier because that is your job. But I'm interested for those of you who this isn't your job, that you have a hustle. If you jump in the comments and talk about, what you do to make sure you stay consistent, because I increasingly just have such a hard time, getting a post together and hitting publish. And I know that being consistent helps, I know that if I just published every day, I would, my following would grow, people would be more engaged, but I just find it increasingly really difficult to do. So let me know what you do to kind of deal with that. Something else, really quickly, I'm gonna ask you guys, I think we're gonna be sending a survey out about Drink with James. I think this show should be much more popular. I think more people should listen to me in general. I think more of the world should be taking my advice in general on all things social media or outside of it. And it's grown and it's doing well. And almost every meeting or I go to or influencers that I meet, they talk about Drink with James and say I love it. And that strokes my ego and that makes me feel really good. So please continue doing that. But it could be bigger, and I think it should be bigger. And I'm wondering from you guys, what you think we could do to either make the podcast side of this or YouTube better and make it grow more. Obviously, it hasn't been a huge focus of the business. Our focus is on making more money and building great tools for influencers, not making me famous, unfortunately. But if you want to email me, james@fohr.co, if you have any suggestions on things you want to see out of the show, things you think we could do to make it more popular, or things you think we're doing that are stopping it from being as popular as it could be, please let me know, because I I do, it is my destiny to be famous. That is just something I understand about myself. And I don't necessarily think Drink with James is my path to that fame, but it certainly should be contributing more to it. So let me know what I could be doing. Okay, we're gonna move on to questions. We'll keep them kind of brief today. Question number one is, what are my thoughts on the Byte app? I actually just talked to Wired about this. We'll throw a link to that article in. I think the reporter did a great job kind of talking about the app and the struggles that it faces. Look, I mean, I think there's some interesting things there. I think the idea for a platform built on virality like TikTok and Byte are, sharing revenue with influencers, sharing ad revenue with influencers is a really fair way to do things, because sponsored posts are a little bit more difficult to do and not as authentic to the platform. I think for the reasons we've talked about, comedy is difficult for brands, entertainment is difficult for influencers to do, video is hard to be compelling for a lot of people. And the things a lot of times that go viral on these platforms are not planned. They're funny moments. Your cat did something funny. Like, you can't really engineer that thing. So it makes it hard to do sponsored posts in that way. So I think sharing revenue is an interesting concept. I think 6-second videos, as I said to the Wired reporter, that I don't think nostalgia is a business plan, really. I shoot on a film camera and I listen to music on records. I enjoy that analog, tactile part of interacting with things in that way. But records aren't a viable solution in today's world to listening to music, and film photography is not a viable threat to digital photography in today's world. They're hobbies. They're kind of like nice to haves and throwbacks. And I just think that for me, the 6-second looping video is a bit short, and I think TikTok being longer allows video to be 12 seconds, 30 seconds, 45, a minute. It gives you some more time to play with that, to tell a little bit fuller story. So my concern is that the founder of Vine is pissed off that Twitter shut down Vine, understandably, is recreating Vine, but recreating Vine in a world that Vine existed years ago and it's moved on. I love Tumblr. I miss it every single day. That was my favorite thing that was ever, my favorite part of the internet ever was Tumblr. But if Tumblr started today, it would never fucking be successful. It's a different world. It's a different world. People consume in a different way. I think the world has loved Vine and moved on. Twitter didn't shut it down because it was making so much fucking money that they couldn't possibly manage it anymore. They shut it down because it wasn't working, right? And they didn't want to support it anymore. And so I think that this, should you go sign up for it? Sure, sign up for it, because as I tell you, when these platforms are new, it's easier to build a following, and you might as well, because God knows I've been wrong before and I will be wrong again. So you might as well get on there and play around. Do I think it will compete with TikTok? Absolutely not. I don't. Question number 2 is, why use micro influencers over macro? I reject this whole line of thinking, right? There are all these pundits out there and articles that'll be like, oh, micro influencers are so much better. Nano influencers are better. Mid-tier macros are better. At Fohr, we don't make money on clickbaity, stupid fucking marketing articles. So we don't have that narrow of a view of when and how you should deploy an influencer. First, let's just say influencer selection for us. We're running 90 of these campaigns this week for our clients. The influencers that we select are the manifestation of all of our strategy, right? And so the way we look at it, we say, what is this brand's challenges? How are we going to solve those problems? What is the brief going to be? What's the concept? We start with an influential idea. What's the thing that is going to stick in people's brains? How am I going to attach somebody's story to this idea and make sure it integrates with the brand and what that brand does. Like, it is actually quite complex, right? But all of that is manifested in who you pick. And so, whether it is a micro or macro, that is about scale and how many people you want to reach, and what your budgets are. But for us, when people are like, micro influencers perform better than macro influencers, I know that person is full of shit, because there is no, are engagement rates different for micro and macro influencers? Yes, but like, engagement rates don't really matter on their own. Is reach better for micro influencers? Of course it is, because Instagram is assuming for someone with 3,000, 5,000 followers that person knows a lot of those people, has at least some sort of relationship with those followers, and so they're more likely to serve that content to those followers, and so the reach numbers are better because the scale is so much lower. That doesn't mean they perform better. Two micro influencers isn't going to do shit for your brand, just like one big macro influencer posting isn't going to do shit for your brand. You need robust strategies that are not only influencer, but everything. What are you doing on Facebook? Ads. What are you doing on Instagram? Ads. What are you doing on your website? What's your email strategy? What's your out-of-home strategy? Are you doing TV? Are you doing radio? What is your fucking product? Is it any good? Are people talking about it? Do they like it? What's your pricing? All of these things determine what is successful. So saying a micro influencer is better than a macro influencer is idiotic. And for us, we look at a few things. We look at all of that hard data, your reach, your engagement, your saves, your swipe ups, how much sales you did, how many DMs you got. Every single piece of data, we get it, we rank it dependent on the brand's KPIs. And then we look at how you did across all the other influencers in that campaign, right? And so we create benchmarks for that. And then we look at how much we paid you. And so we're able to come out with a value per dollar number that allows us to look at a person with 10,000 followers or 5 million followers and say, for each dollar that we spent on this person, how much value did we get? And then we're able to score them and to kind of look at it in a totally unbiased way and figure out who is actually moving the needle. And sometimes we find out, shit, if we had 100 of these micro influencers performing at this level, it's going to do great. Let's do that for the next campaign. Sometimes we find out, actually, because as macro influencers, as the following gets bigger, you pay less for each additional follower as far as advertising goes. The price per eyeball goes down as the follower rate goes up, but sometimes it makes a lot more sense to use macros, And so beware of anyone writing that, saying that this is concretely 100% better than this because that person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. The world is more complex than that. And generally, marketing thought leaders are full of shit and should not exist on this earth in general, myself excluded. I am obviously a thought leader that should exist. Last up, I want to talk about how to stand out in your interactions with your followers, with brands, with anyone kind of over, that you're meeting in person or email that you don't know well, but you're directly interacting with. Anytime you leave a meeting or an interaction with someone, a lot of times, there are always action items, right? People promise to do things. I'm going to introduce you to this person. I'm going to send you a link to this hotel, you stayed at, whatever it is. And over 50% of the time, those promises are not done. And something that I've been focusing on in my own life, and that I've already seen being really helpful, is setting up systems to make sure that any interaction you have with someone, if you've said you're going to do something, figuring out how are you going to do it? How are you going to make sure that happens? And creating opportunities to do favors for people. I think that, you guys know I love those Lyndon Johnson books, and if you've got a year of your life, and you want to burn through them, I 100% recommend that as a good use of your time. And my boy James Zimmerman, if you're listening, I know you're an LBJ man yourself, he read them. But I've talked about this before. Lyndon Johnson essentially became president off doing favors for people. He was maniacal about figuring out how he could do something for someone and then doing it immediately and not asking for anything in return. And they're what he would call a 5-minute favor, something that takes you just a couple minutes to do, you know? And to be able to do that, you have to understand what people are struggling with, what they're interested in. You know, you think about what is this person's passions and interests, and what professional struggles are they having right now. And if you know those two things, you open up huge opportunities for you to do something above and beyond that sets you apart and makes you really memorable, you know? And so if you're at a meeting with a client and they say, you know, and you ask if they're traveling anywhere, and they say they are, and you've been there, then, and you have a blog post about it, send them that blog post, obviously, right? If you haven't been there, maybe you go do a little research and you say, oh, I've heard about this restaurant, you should check it out while you're there. And then you put a note in your calendar about when they're going, and when they get back, say, did you go to that restaurant? How was your trip? But that ability to like find a way to do something for someone and then to do it right away, it puts you on a whole other level of competency, that people will just start to think about you in a different way, because you know what they said about Lyndon Johnson was that like he was a guy that got things done because he just never promised something that he didn't do or try to do, and immediately, not in 2 weeks. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I forgot about this, like just remembered, or oh my gosh, my inbox has been crazy, I'm just getting to this. It's about doing that stuff immediately and going the extra mile. And I'd say, you know, for your followers as well, I know the DMs and emails and all of that can be a lot. But again, let's just talk about LBJ for a second, because this is a passion of mine. You know, he was crazy. He worked people like crazy. And he worked, you know, till like 2 a.m. every day. But like if one of his constituents from like rural Texas had something, hey, can you help me get my pension? He was like, he had his staff on that day, you know, and he solved that problem that day. And so for your followers, again, it's easy to see those incessant questions as a burden, as like, why do they keep asking me this? It's so annoying that like I tag the brand in the photo and then people still ask me what the brand is. Like, yes, I understand that is annoying. What if you flip it and say that like, I'm gonna come up with a system so that every single question I get gets answered effectively. And that person now feels really special because because they're thinking you're at a different level than them and you took the time to answer them. You know, I've started sending these like, you know, these follow-up meetings after follow-up emails after meetings. And a lot of times it's people coming asking me for a meeting, but then I send the follow-up email saying, hey, this is exactly what I'm going to do for you. And they're always like, oh my God, thank you so much. I was going to send you a follow-up. Sorry, I didn't get to it. Like they feel like you care, you know, they feel like you value them and that meeting was important to you as well. And I think if you can flip it and think about, as we say, providing value at every interaction, and you should think about that with your posts, right? That every post should provide value, but every interaction you have with your audience should provide value. And you should be thinking about how you can do that. And if you can't handle it yourself, think about how can I get a staff, if you can afford that and you're doing well enough, how can I hire people to scale this? How can I scale myself so that anytime someone asks a question, they're getting an answer that day? Because I think if you did that, you know, are you going to get growth right away? No. But I think in a year, your following and what was happening in that following would be dramatically different. Because, you know, we talk about Grace Atwood all the time. I think she is someone that takes that stuff very seriously, about saying like, if she's getting a question from her audience, she is answering it. She's putting time and thought into that answer, not looking at it as a burden. And businesses need to scale, right? Like, we're hiring a bunch of people at Fohr. We're going to be over 50 people this year. That is happening because the scale of the business changes, and I need more people to support the level of shit that we're trying to achieve. And that is how we continue to grow. And so as you grow, your operation needs to scale, and you need to figure out how you can make yourself bigger and how you can make sure that you can interact more broadly with that audience. That is one of the many lessons that you can take from Lyndon B. Johnson. And with that, I say au revoir.